be over here.
Yeah, that's where I am on my screen too, so worked perfectly. Hi, everybody. I'm JP, or Jennifer Perrine, and I'm joining tonight from Clackamas Land in Portland, Oregon. And I'm really grateful that you all are here tonight, both those of you who are Zooming in from the Portland area and from maybe some more far-flung locations. I'm glad that you're here for these readers. I want to thank Jessica and Literary Arts for hosting us, and also give another plug for those fellowships. If you are a writer, those fellowships can really be life-changing. It was for me, so get an application in. I also want to thank Elisa and Another Read Through for selling books by Incite's featured writers. There will be more information about those coming up soon. And for those of you who haven't attended Incite before, I just want to give you a little lay of the land here. So each event starts with readings on a theme by our featured readers, and that's followed by a community discussion around some questions that are tied to that theme. So the theme for tonight is history lessons. And I think that Vinny and I were in a reflective, maybe pensive mood when we chose tonight's theme. We were thinking about all that we've learned from this last year and a half or more of living in the midst of a pandemic, and how this time both echoes and is distinct from past epidemics and pandemics. And I think, I don't want to speak for Vinny, but I also perhaps was feeling a little frustrated about lessons that maybe still have yet to be learned about how we might better care for ourselves and each other and our communities and this planet that we inhabit. So we were sort of wondering about how future generations might look back on this time and what they would make of all of our choices right now. So that's some of the backstory behind tonight's theme. But tonight we're going to have three different perspectives on the theme from writers who are going to share their own history lessons, sometimes history with a capital H, sometimes more personal history. And then after they read, we'll move into small groups to talk about our own history lessons, and then we'll come back together as a whole community before we close out the night. I am going to pop our conversation questions for those small groups in the chat in case you want to mull them over for later. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first reader of the night, who's Masonbimi Yadira. So a friend gave me a copy of their chapbook that came out earlier this year. And when I read it, I was so excited just to be introduced to another poet in the Portland area. It's always an exciting thing. And then I was even more delighted as I went and researched some of their work to learn that Masonbimi is also a multimedia visual artist, an abolitionist community organizer. And I immediately thought, I hope they'll want to share their work at Incite. So by way of a little bit of a bio here, Masonbimi Yadira, in addition to the things I've mentioned already, is also a queer, agender, and mixed race Salvadoreño and white person living in Portland, Oregon. Their writing and art has been featured at Erickson Gallery, Form Art events, PSU's Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies colloquiums, and at multiple reading and performance events. With poems previously published in journals, collections, and online mags, they have their first full-length self-published poetry chapbook, Comes in Threes, available to purchase on their website. Previews of new or upcoming writing and art projects can be viewed on their website as well, and that's masonbimi.com. Please welcome Masonbimi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming. I was feeling some nerves right before this, but I think they've gone away a little bit now. It's been a while since I've done a reading. But yeah, I have copies. And also my audio is a little laggy. I could not fix that, but I have copies of my chapbook available, and I'm going to read quite a few poems from this. And a lot of them I feel like wound up fitting the theme super well, which is lucky for me. So the first one is called Peeling Oranges. I'm nothing like my mother. I cried when I got my first period standing next to her. Sat in a living room with her every summer, TV on, while I asked a new question about her home every day. The bonding habits of two people who don't know how else to connect. I watch you eating toothpaste, a baby beluga again, the daughter of two immigrants, the least favored grandchild. I wonder if you know, will you ever know, the ways in which we put so much faith into the idea of a mother. A mother is there to scream at your bruised fingers and to kiss it better, kiss it better, kiss it better. Baby beluga, I don't think it ever gets better. We are everything like our mother. And then the second one is called The Greenhouse with Purple Shutters. I am being engulfed by a dead mattress filled with worms. I try to find refuge underneath the staircase. Here there are cicadas. They sing for me while I run to a washing machine. Here I fill each hole with a single worm. Here I wait while roses are stuffed down my throat. They're covered in concentrated perfume. I say, enjoy the smell, forget about the worms. Don't forget to chew the roses. You could choke. The thorns snag my esophagus on their way down. Rose-stained insides, just what I asked for, just what I already had. Each crack in my hand doubles as an opening. Out come tulips. My shadow falls asleep finally. Without it, I make a stir-fry of worms, roses, tulips, cicadas. Leaves with the tongue said, can't eat this. I cannot eat this. Without my shadow, I go to the Saturday market. Crows sing out here. They don't sing for me. Grace talks about the new trend of having the shingles on the roofs of houses round around the edges. How this is ugly. How she is a contractor. I trust her. So she knows it's ugly and useless. I talk to my grandma about this. She talks to her sister about this. And it goes on until the general consensus is that this trend is ugly. No one else knows it, but we all trust Grace. There was never any reason to decide if the wraparound shingles are ugly. We all made a useless decision on a useless thing. And that one mentioned my grandma, who is here today. Thank you for coming, Grandma. The third one is called Mayday. I figured out what the smell is, the one that wanders like someone has snuck into my room. Brought along the same smelling incense that was stuck on my abuela's bones before she died. Still now, as the people at the morgue prepare her body for a viewing on May 1st. I won't go to her viewing. Seeing one dead body laid on a table was enough for me. My abuela's smell finds its way to me for the second time since she died. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or if any of my friends believe in ghosts. I don't even know what my Catholic family think of ghosts. But I do know the distinct feeling of a dead loved one saying goodbye to me for my benefit, resting a shadow hand on my cheek, sitting next to me while I sprawl on a hardwood floor, running their smell underneath my nose. I think that apple cinnamon is the closest I could get to describing it. And this next one is called Orange Sadness. Orange sadness is the sadness of one of the brightest stars, Arcturus. Orange sadness is a picture of each of your dead loved ones up on a gallery wall for sale. Orange sadness is the pang of a hangnail throughout the day, car alarms going off at night, goosebumps arriving and departing, cuts on your cold hands. Cold hands can only be caused by holding cold objects. The sadness of white-hot pain. Orange sadness can only be seen through a mirror in an apartment, overlooking kids in a parking lot, overlooking ants in the cracks. And the second to last one from the book is called Refusal. We drive around nightmare cities, with cockroaches on the streets, hour-long traffic to get a few miles to pupusas and salvadoreño pan dulce. And the family deaths come like dominoes, falling into each other. I save my tears for the airport, refuse to fill any of the holes in the car rides. The worry wart. I save my tears for the airport, only crying without support, like I'm holding on to tadpoles. I save my tears for the airport, refuse to fill any of the holes. Okay, and this one is called Listening to Playlists by the Dead. It's the itch on the top of your tooth, the one on the very inside of your skull. It's getting too much sleep and everyone tries waking you up to make sure you're okay. Like I can't have my eyes closed for more than 2 minutes when everyone is around. It's the most sun my skin has ever gotten in a 4-week period. The way the burns help me remind my skin that it's alive. It's the smell of the dumpsters in the sun and the taste of early summer where we plan for memorials and goodbyes and fresh wounds. It's the earbuds getting tangled, the sound of, are you okay, are you okay, are you okay, okay, okay. And there's many more poems and some art pieces in this book. I originally made a zine by the same name with some of the same poems, but they've been really heavily edited between then and now. And now it's a chapbook with a lot more poems and a lot more art. So yeah. And then I have a few more poems I'm going to read, not from the book, but that I feel like fits the theme really well. 22. I assume no one ever remembers me. I'm just as inconsequential to them as I am to the person in all my baby pictures. The one with wind in their eyes, watering the plants beneath them, sweat pooling in their frilly socks. If I smile, I'll choke. My relationships with my mom and my sisters and my grandmas are all more complicated than female relationships. They're each me changing my name, reminding them I'm not a girl, only feeling comfortable with femininity when the people around me aren't misgendering me. So I choke. As I pull my arms up walking down Burnside, cool off the sweat that's been building up for hours, staring each driver in their small eyes as they pass. I was 6 when I was in my only car crash. We swerved off an icy road into pitch black winter. Red Jeep tumbling, 3 young children and their young mom. Years later, my sister and I both remember the feeling of switching seats somewhere in the crash. After learning what a crash can do, we all climbed out of the Jeep, walked back to town, leaving me with a scar on my hand that I rubbed for comfort, and a mother, helping and hurting me in all of my memories. See, we've changed, except our lungs still contract too hard and our hearts still beat too fast and our legs still shake. I can't say I'm afraid of car rides or disappointment anymore, but I still hate driving with the windows down. I can never catch my breath. I can't push my words out when it counts now, but I cried when my mom called me my chosen name for the first time, after not speaking for years, hurting me, then helping me. And then this next one is called Birthdays, Holidays, Graduations. Each of my siblings are correcting their teeth right now, and I think of asking them if it's different for a 13 and 19 and 25-year-old. How it feels for their teeth to move so slowly, if the metal squeezes too tight, if there's a word for the feeling of moving through trauma together. How many cavities they have, if they also feel like we are just obligated to each other now. If they struggle to remember as much as I do, if they have people they love, how often they fall asleep with sugar rotting their teeth, if they really have people. Let's start again. I think of asking if they have found people that make sure they feel loved. Okay. And then the last one I have prepared to read is called I Still Think of Melting. I still think of melting into shiny all-metal elevators, like the ones at school, the art museum, the hospital. The boy who only wears swim shorts and green Crocs pops into my head again. But tonight the puddles in his feet would surely turn to ice. Which version of me did the boy get? Which version of me do the elevators get? Which version of me do I get? I wash my mouth out and it feels like the moment needles stop striking skin. Like rubbing rose petals into your eyeballs. Like pressing your eyes against glass. Like mashing glass and rose petals together. Like swimming. I'm swimming in a body and people call it my body. Okay. That's all I had prepared for everyone. And thanks to Literary Arts for asking me to read. This is great.
Thanks, Masonbimi. It was so good to listen to, especially your new poems, or the poems that weren't in your chapbook, to get introduced to those. I especially love that litany of questions in the birthdays, holidays, graduation poem. And thank you to Masonbimi's grandma, wherever you are, for being here tonight. Next up is David Js Pickering. And I first read David's writing in, I think, January-ish of 2020, when he sent his manuscript, Jesus Comes to Me as Judy Garland, to Airlie Press's annual prize. And when I read it, I was just struck by the beauty and defiance and candor of his poems. And now that we're a year and 8 or so months later, David's book is out in the world as of last week. And I feel really lucky that I have the chance to help in that process and but I got to know David along the way. So David Pickering is a native Oregonian, having grown up and lived much of his life in the working class culture of the North Oregon coast. His first poetry collection, Jesus Comes to Me as Judy Garland, received the 2020 Airlie Prize and was published by Airlie Press on September 1st. David says he never aspired to have a website, so he's a bit nonplussed to find that he now has one at www.pickpoetry.com. He recently retired from a 30-year career in human resources management. Wearing shorts and t-shirts each day continues to thrill him. He and his husband, Stephen, live in Hillsboro, Oregon. Please help me welcome David.
Good evening, folks. How you doing? Happy to see everybody this evening. I have some poems to read to you from the new collection. Can you see it? Yeah, you can see it. Anyway, I have several poems, and I'm nervous. I'm nervous. So bear with me, and I'll try and scrape myself off the ceiling, and we'll come to the end of this in good shape, I'm sure. As Jennifer told you, I grew up on North Oregon coast, and I was born and raised in Rockaway Beach, and I lived there for many years, even as an adult, which was probably my first resentment. But nevertheless, I was a weird kid. I know that might be hard for some of you to believe. I see some names of people I know, including my husband. And I lived in a little south of town in a little area of vacation homes. And I had this route of old ladies I would just drop in on out of the blue. And they always took me in, and I kind of became an old lady myself. And this poem is about that. It's titled, At Age 10, I Am the Joy of Old Ladies. Their husbands are dead. They've continued their little shingle retirements, playing pinochle and canasta, and driving their old Buicks, rusty, bulbous, and passé as our tired resort town, with its bumper cars and motor courts and no reason to pull off the highway. I catch on fast, a clever partner when they need a fourth, and always happy to empty ashtrays, to refill plates of jam-stuffed cookies served on sets of 40s high-Z. My presence is unquestioned, though my preteen boy-girl body, my lazy belly and unmanly breasts strains my clothes, strains dad's tolerance, grandma's indulgence, other boys' ready inclusion. These ladies deal me in. Let me have real coffee and the scoop. I know about the mayor's first wife and why Tommy doesn't look like his sister. I know Mr. Sims used to sell homemade booze. I know about Bobby, whose mom owns the Curly and Cute, how he got arrested in Portland for something I couldn't quite hear and was sent to Salem for shock treatments. The ladies tut and coo, pass me more cookies and admire my meld. Tell me I'm smart. Say I'm a wonderful boy. I grew up in a family, Masonic and Eastern Star family, which required that I become a Demolay Boy, which is kind of a junior Mason thing. And this poem is about that. And I was actually in an organization that used a black ball as a way of choosing or not choosing members. And this poem talks about that a little bit. Anyway, Demolay Boy. I come from Masons, a long line of masters. I learned the Demolay secret handshake, how to turn square corners around the stations, how to say the prayers on one knee, trying not to laugh when Jim made fart sounds. I was not a straight boy for long. Everyone knew before I did. And once I was excluded from the comfortable camaraderie of boys, I learned to love what I could. I loved the way trees grew like fur all the way to the dunes, how land and ocean flowed into each other. I loved the way the loggers smelled of pitch and sweat when they came out of the woods, stubbled beards and unzipped hickory shirts, nests of sawdust caught in their chest hair. I loved their tired eyes as I filled the tanks and washed the windshields of their pickups. I loved the way they knew my past, asked what my dad and his brothers were up to, how my grandma was doing. I loved the way they looked in their suits at the Mason's Lodge on our Demolay nights, bad ties and butch waxed hair, their deep voices telling us how to use the mahogany box of small white balls, one black in their midst. It's easy, one ball, one vote. Put a white one through the hole if you want them, and put a black one through if you don't. Rough, scrubbed hands passing it along the line of boys, each of us given the heady power to exclude. And I remember savoring the possibility of revenge, reliving the sneered stings of faggot, the worst word one boy can call another, as I fingered that hot black ball. I held it for a long moment before putting it back, knowing even then what it was I loved about me, about them. Okay, Rockaway had a Chinese food restaurant, really crappy Chinese food, but it's what we had, and it was anyway, Chinese food. A ceramic Buddha blesses the blue lace curtains and rust-colored Naga hide boots. Plastic Canton lanterns throw haphazard pools of light on the indoor-outdoor carpet. Menus are exotic lipstick promises. Outside the picture windows, happy ducks paddle through rushes and bread crusts floating on Lake Lytle. Delicate celadon willows sway with the motorhomes zipping down Highway 101. Rapid-fire Chinese flies like plates from the kitchen, at once foreign and normal, like the number 4 combo plate, like the spice-hot surprise of Kung Pao blooming in my mouth, like the first time I kissed a man. America. I hear you're really good. Word gets around, and when the first messenger came, I gave him reason to believe and tell his friends. Nameless confirmers queued up on stools, straight shots 3 deep. In '82, I could go all night. We all could. We reveled in our secretions, danced in our sacred secrets, unconquerable, nothing incurable before the plague, tight money, and internet porn took the fun out of cruising. And so what if a bunch of fundamentalists didn't like us? We set the trends and had our friends in chambers, knew the value of alliances formed in dark corners, how to swallow when it was expedient, how to dominate when they wanted it hard, how to wave the bottle of poppers under their noses as they shot. And as long as they got off, more coke, more cock, more jokes, we did as we pleased, marketed ourselves with the hype hustle where the first taste is always free and we controlled distribution. Everyone bought our line. wanted what we had. I don't have to tell you how that worked out. Where we are now, so pedestrian, another sitcom character, fashion commentator, old queen sitting at the end of the bar watching worker bees come in for happy hour, drunk and worst insult, ignored. Back in the day, I called it shift change, the hour when we pretty men in polo shirts and members only jackets eyed those tired old things, dismissed their eye contact as pitiful, stood like jackals as we waited for them to give up their stools, our worst fears finally reeling out the door as we returned to business, tuning up for another night's cruise. Come morning, we left first names and numbers on backs of matchbooks and reckoned our way home on the bus, the smell of camels and old booze oozing out our pores. And after all I know now of lesions and rehabs, the truth is I want back those nights of illusory impunity. The guy with the big one who couldn't use it, the ginger bear who could, that Italian with the gym-built pecs, furry abs, and Sicilian lips, and me, always scanning the back bar mirror for new and next, and the elegant darkness returned in the glass. And finally, this evening, I have Jesus Comes to Me as Judy Garland. Heavy-lidded Milltown eyes full of knowing how it is. He wears the little black dress she wore on Jack Parr in '62, her last good years before the voice went and she got so weird and died in London, seated on the loo. He has a pink follow spot, says he loves what it does for his complexion when he belts them out at Carnegie Hall, gets the people on their feet, clapping, standing on the seats, shimmying in the aisles, says everyone wants a piece of rapture to tuck and savor later, to help them through the days of shrink-wrapped tweets and Pandora playlists. Jesus said he knew he had to intervene when he heard me in the 7th grade hallway singing, "Don't Rain on My Parade," knew I was more of a Judy than a Barbara, and gave me A Star Is Born to replace my funny girl infatuation. He says Judy knew better how to project the note, send it through whirring atoms of air, through sinew and bone to stroke the heart, and move into space where it begat glowing galaxies, gaseous clouds of color spinning, red to blue to gold like the light on Grammy's silver Christmas tree glinting in her living room as the Judy Garland show boomed on the TV. Just listen to her, says Jesus. I knew you'd love Judy, that she'd be your truth and your way. I heard it when you were born. Your first cry, that note went spinning, created a world light years away. Look, he points to a star, then another and another. Look, see what you can do. You help create the heavens. He takes my hand and I can see the pulsar I made singing The Man That Got Away in the basement, age 15, fat and queenie and flawless. The quasar made to get happy singing in Grandpa's old fedora, "We're going to the promised land." Notes flung like solar winds, a celestial borealis flaring on my shoulders, a feather boa of serpentine light, my fingers snapping planets and shooting bright fire. I'm done. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, David. That was fantastic. I very much relate to your 10-year-old boy who is friends with all the old ladies. I very much relate to that, but thank you very much. So wow, I'm already feeling very full off of so much so much wonderful poetry and words. And but as we like to say in our house, when we are done eating dinner and we are so full, it is time to engage your dessert stomach, because we still have more food coming. So, so I'm excited to introduce our final reader of the night, Alan Rose. Alan is the author of The Legacy of Emily Hargraves, a gay paranormal mystery, Tales of Tokyo, a modern quest novel based on his years of living and working in Japan, and a novella, The Unforgiven, a complex psychological thriller that explores the relationship between memory and guilt. Alan's most recent novel, As If Death Summons, was published on World AIDS Day, December 1st, 2020, and won this year's Forward Indies Book of the Year Award for the LGBT category. Alan coordinates WordFest, a monthly gathering of readers and writers in Southwest Washington, hosts the KLTV program Book Chat, and is the book reviewer for the Columbia River Reader. He worked at Cascade AIDS Projects in Portland from 1993 to 1999, and was a volunteer with the Victorian AIDS Project in Melbourne before that. So please give a great big welcome to Alan.
Thank you, Vinny. Thank you, Vinny and JP, for the invitation tonight. I want to thank Literary Arts for making this possible. I want to say, Eliza, hello, and thank you for the work you do. Really appreciate it. The novel I wrote that won the award, As If Death Summoned, is about the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and the 90s. And E.L. Doctorow, the famous novelist who wrote Billy Bathgate and Ragtime, other books, he once said that the historian tells us what happened. The historical novelist tells us what it felt like. And I wanted to write an account of the AIDS epidemic, particularly here in Portland, and tell what it felt like. I worked, as Vinny said, at Cascade AIDS Project from 93 to 99. And when I left to become a director of social services up in Washington State, I knew I wanted to write this book, but I didn't know how I'd go about it. And I made many attempts at it. And through the years, I just kept on putting notes away of memories. But for those of you who are writers, you know that it's not only the story that we want to tell, but it's how we tell it. You know, what's the narrative frame? How are we going to get into it? So I decided not to do the memoir approach because I needed something more expansive. And in 2015, I retired just to write full time. And after struggling with this novel for so many years, where I felt it was sort of steeping and percolating in my subconscious, suddenly it gushed forward. And it really came out within about 2 years. I got the frame for what I wanted to say, how I was going to tell the different stories. And it came together in a way that really allowed me to move through it and to finish it. The novel takes place over one night in a Portland hospital waiting room where the narrator is holding a vigil for a friend in the ICU. He's had many vigils over the years in Australia and then in Portland. Friends, colleagues, people that he knew and cared about. His partner was Australian and died in Australia, which is the reason he came back to the States. So what I wanted to do was try to capture this panorama of the AIDS epidemic. And much like the AIDS quilt, I didn't want to tell one story, the narrator story. I wanted to tell a number of stories. And this allowed me to do it because as he's sitting there alone in the waiting room, he has memories, random thoughts, observations of being in the room, maybe some hallucinations because he's been over 30 hours without sleep. He flew in from the East Coast. And I wanted to have this magical realism effect where you're never really sure whether this is memory or whether this is hallucination or what's happening. I also knew that I needed to include humor because when you say AIDS novel, people are going to think a downer. What a downer. And so very intentionally, I wanted to bring humor into this. And in part, that was because there was humor in the epidemic. And any of you who were there during those years, you will probably can attest to this. The humor was bleak. The humor was often gallows humor, but it helped sustain us, helped carry us through that time. And I wanted the book to have humor. And I think one of the reasons why it won the award was because it surprised a lot of people. A number of reviewers have said that they weren't expecting a funny book about the AIDS epidemic. And so I was pleased that it succeeded that way. Also, the last comment I'll make before I read is there was a sense I wanted to create in the reader of what's really happening here. I wanted, with this magical realism, to question the nature of consciousness itself. And as the narrator is sitting in the waiting room over these hours alone, I wanted to capture that slipperiness of consciousness, how our minds go in and out to memories and fantasies and all of that. And the book actually begins with a famous fable, which you probably have all heard, of the 4th century BC Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi. It goes like this. There once was a Chinese philosopher who dreamt he was a butterfly. The dream was so real that he wondered whether it had been a dream, or was he a butterfly, now dreaming he was a Chinese philosopher. And that fable sort of carries a theme through the book, and it reappears about halfway through in a chapter I call a philosophical fable. In this scene, the narrator is in Australia, camping with his Australian partner, Gray. And Gray is sort of a romantic. He's a mystic, and he loves to be out under the great starry sky and imagine big thoughts. The narrator tends to be a rational skeptic. So there's often some interesting tension between them. And in this scene, the Gray is trying to share this fable with the narrator. Also, it was typical of their relationship that they had this little game going on where one would cite a passage of poetry and the other one would try to guess who the poet was. Once upon a time, Gray told me a fable. It was autumn, the land sere and dry, the evening quickly chilling as we had our meal next to the campfire. It went like this. There once was a Chinese philosopher. Which part of China? What? China's a big place. Which province did he come from? It's a fable. Does it matter? I like to know these things. He was from Hangzhou. You made that up. Anyway, there once was this Chinese philosopher. Any particular school? What do you mean particular school? Ancient China had a number of different schools of thought. Confucianism, Taoism, Chan Buddhism. He had an online degree. Oh, one of those schools. So this Chinese philosopher, he once dreamt that he was a butterfly. And no, I don't know what kind of butterfly. Too bad. It would have added authenticity to the story. Okay, he was a monarch butterfly. I didn't know they had monarch butterflies in China. The butterfly was visiting, so he wasn't a real Chinese butterfly. No, but the philosopher was a real Chinese philosopher with a wonky degree. Do you want to hear this fable or not? All ears, shoot. So this Chinese philosopher with a wonky degree from Hangzhou dreamt he was a monarch butterfly visiting China on a tourist visa. I appreciate the details. They make the story more interesting. I realize you're a concrete thinker. The dream was so real, must have missed the REM stage of sleep. The dream was so real, and this is the important part. He couldn't tell whether he was a Chinese philosopher who dreamt he was a butterfly or was actually a butterfly, now dreaming he was a Chinese philosopher. Gray exhaled. He seemed relieved the telling was over. That's it? That's the whole fable? He shook his head. I'm sorry I bothered, and resumed eating. No, it was okay, though it didn't have much of a narrative arc, and the character of the Chinese philosopher was kind of one-dimensional. He could have been developed a bit more. Just pass the tobacco sauce. Here. So what's the point of the fable? The point? Gray put down the bottle and recited, all that we see and seem is a dream within a dream. Edgar Allan Poe, really deep. And I recited back, something unknown is doing we don't know what. He creased his brow. Who said that? Sir Arthur Eddington. His explanation for how the universe works. Eddington was a poet, physicist. All physicists are poets. They just use mathematics instead of words. I call foul. Gray handed back the Tabasco sauce. The fable suggests we can never be sure of who we are. Well, at least I'm sure I'm not a butterfly. Pretty sure. Philosophers have been trying to answer that question for thousands of years. Whether we're really butterflies? No, what's real? Descartes set out to doubt everything he could, to take nothing for granted until he found that which he could not doubt. Descartes, he that I think, therefore I am guy, right. Cogito ergo sum. He eliminated everything down to the one thing he couldn't doubt, that he was thinking. And if he was thinking, then he must be real. But he assumed he was thinking. Huh? I'm saying maybe he stopped doubting a step too soon. He could have been hallucinating or merely dreaming that he was thinking. Gray considered this. Okay, but either way, it's still proof that he exists. What, I hallucinate, therefore I am? Doesn't seem as persuasive an argument. The question is, how do you really know what's real? Whether you're a philosopher dreaming he's a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming he's a philosopher. Are those the only two choices? For the purposes of this discussion, yes. Then I'd rather be a philosopher with tenure. He sighed. I think we're losing the point here. Remind me again that we can't ultimately know what's real. This right now could all simply be a dream I'm having. But if you're in the dream, how would you ever know whether it's a dream? Gray erupted in excitement. Exactly. That's the whole point. Brilliant. I stared at him. I think I missed the brilliant point I just made. That we can't tell whether we're really dreaming or not. This may all be a dream I'm having, and you're just part of it. You're suggesting I'm not real, that I'm part of your dream? Could be. He looked at me expectantly. Great. If this is your dream, you do the dishes, and I'll dream I'm reading a book. With a grim smile, he leaned over, kissed me, and took my empty plate. Read your book. I'll do the dishes. You are so lucky to have me. I know, though it may only be a dream. Read your book. What's strange is that now, years later, my time in Australia does seem more like a dream than a memory. A dream where I was lucky to have Gray. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Alan. That's wonderful. And thanks again to all of our readers for tonight. Just as a reminder, every one of our readers actually has books and chapbooks you can publish. I know Masonbimi has theirs on their website. And David and Alan, you've been seeing links from Lisa and another read through all through the evening. And I always want to remind everybody, encourage everybody that that's one of the best ways you can support our writers is by purchasing their books. And I'm going to continue to throw this out there until somebody takes me up on it. We've had enough Incite readers over the years and a great list of books that somebody could start book club that's just reading through people who have been featured at Incite. And I would love to see someone do that. I'm not doing it, but I'd love to see somebody start that. So I'm just going to keep saying this every time until somebody's like, you know what? I'm going to start that book club. So somebody rise if you don't want to hear me say it again. But with that said, let's give everybody just one more round of, virtual applause here. And we've heard 3 very fun perspectives on history lessons. And now it is everyone's turn to talk about this subject. In a moment, we're going to be broken out into